love it. I love it. Yeah, no. I feel like it's like I'm getting a weird amount of sun, right? And so
Yeah, you would probably need to close the blinds behind you, man, or a little bit.
yeah, probably, but like that's not my that's not my male pattern vanity. That's not what I'm so concerned with. But no,
Yeah.
I'm getting a weird amount of sun like in general in life because I feel like
Oh,
at times I look like kind of a little pale, like I got anemia, and then other times I look like a giant red cheek. You know, I don't
yeah.
know, one big rosy cheek. Anyhow, we are live. We are joined this hour by Juan Tejeda. I'm very very excited. This man's name has come up time and time again. Every time I talk to somebody from the great state of Tejas, and they'll tell you just how great it is every time you talk to them. And so I'm really really excited to be joined by this gentleman. He is a musician, an organizer, professor, an author, a danzante. I mean, he does it all. He's just an incredible soul, and we are lucky to be joined by him in this next hour. Juan, can you tell us a little bit about how you got started in the movement, how you became an artist? Just where does the story begin?
Well, thank you, Matt. First of all, I want to congratulate you for all the work you've been doing here, doing this El Cabrona virus times, man, and everything's going virtual online. I'm kind of a low tech toll tech, so I was having problems here and switching over to all of this online stuff. But anyway, I'm glad that my wife is helping me out here. So I'm originally from Yanaguana, San Antonio, Texas, and born and raised here, and went to Catholic school for 12 years, then went up to the University of Texas in Austin in 1972, brother. And this was kind of the height of the Chicano movement, right? And the civil rights movement. And when I got up there, it was like eye-opening for me. I took my first Chicano history course and everything changed after that. You know, I got heavily involved in the Chicano movement there on campus and in the East Side Barrio, East Austin. And got involved. You know, I played music. I learned how to play the button accordion when I was 9 years old. I learned from Santiago Jimenez Jr. And subsequently I played in his band when I was like 11, 12, 13 years old. And I was playing drums with him out in the congales and the clubs out there. So when I went to Austin, there at the University of Texas, you know, the whole Chicano movement and the Chicano cultural renaissance was happening. So I brought back my accordion and started playing, and we formed the Conjunto Aztlán there in Austin in the mid 70s. We got involved with a bunch of different Chicano arts organizations. First of all, Chicano Art Students Association at the university, and then we changed it to Chicanos Artistas Sirviendo a Aztlán, CASA, you know, Chicano Art Students Association, same one, but moving it more into the barrio. And then I got involved with Lucha, League of United Chicano Artists. And we did a whole bunch of projects there in the community. Well, I was still going to, you know, getting my BA degree at the University of Texas, and my concentration initially was psychology. Then I switched to philosophy, my major. Then I switched to English. And all this time I was taking education courses, and all this time I was taking Chicano studies courses. And I ended up getting my degree in Chicano studies with an emphasis in education. So we started, you know, having poetry recitals and in the community with Lucha, League of United Chicano Artists. For 5 years, I coordinated the Festival Estudiantil Chicano de Arte y Literatura in the schools from K through 12th grade. And we would basically do workshops in the schools for students on Chicano art and literature. And then we got submissions from them at all grade levels. It was a citywide thing in both art and literature. And then we had a citywide exhibit. So I ran that for 5 years through Lucha. They had a murals program. We had workshops in music for our community. We had performances. We were very active in all of the Chicano movement activities of that time, marches against police brutality. And there they had killed a couple of Chicanos on the East Side Barrio. You know, the boycotts with Cesar Chavez early on. The fight for, you know, educational equality and opportunity. And the Marcha de los Campesinos from Texas, from the Valley to Texas to Austin, then they ended up going to Washington. So we were involved in all those things, formed the Conjunto Aztlán, and in this movement back to our roots and to find our indigenous roots, we formed the first Mexica Azteca traditional Aztec dance group that's called Xinashli. The group still exists. For the first 9 years, I was the Jefe Segundo. Jose Flores, who still is the Jefe Primero there outside of Austin in Bastrop. The Grupo Xinashli still exists, still does ceremony, still does presentations around. So I was a Jefe Segundo of Xinashli for 9 years, graduated with my degree in Chicano Studies, came back home to San Antonio, and began working with this new arts organization that was forming here in San Antonio that became the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center. So I started with them in 1980 after I got my degree in 1978. And I worked with the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center for 18 years, brother. We built it up to one of the largest Chicano arts organizations in the nation. We broke a lot of glass ceilings in terms of funding with major corporations, with major foundations. We were like the first one also to get like Ford Foundation grants of like 600,000 and other foundations, the first time that they did and funded Chicano arts organizations. So we had classes in the community and music. I was a Chicano music program director, Chicano with an X, right? Xicano, back in the, in 1981, I changed the name because I was initially hired to be a mariachi project director. And the first year was mariachi. Then the second year I changed it to the Chicano music program and opened it up to other Chicano music, not just mariachi. We still had mariachi classes, but then I started the first Conjunto Tejano classes, music classes in the community, button accordion and bajo sexto, and started the Tejano Conjunto Festival in 1981, 1982. We did a lot of videos. We did exchange programs with different organizations, different cities. And the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center had all of the arts disciplines represented, you know, music, literature, dance, drama, the visual arts, film and video. In fact, Matt, I started the first literature program for the Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center with money from the Chicano music program. And we hired all kinds of people initially, and then ended up hiring Sandra Cisneros when she came from right out of Iowa Writers Workshop. So we did a lot of work there, but we grew. When I left in 1998, after 18 years of working there as the Chicano music program director, we left with, it was an over like a $2.5 million organization. We had an over $1 million endowment. We were doing an annuity program for all the employees. We had directors, full-time directors. We had like 24 full-time people. So one of the largest Chicano arts organizations in the nation. After that, I left in 98, went and got my master's, and then started teaching at the University of Texas in San Antonio, and then switched over to Palo Alto College and began a Conjunto music program there, began the Mexican American Studies program there and the Center for Mexican American Studies. And we worked from then on into the fight that came a little bit later from 2010 to 2018, and got the first Mexican American history course approved by the Texas State Board of Education. So all this time, I've continued playing music, you know, with the Conjunto Aztlán and with my cousin, my primo hermano, Armando Tejeda. I got out of danza after 9 years to focus on other things, partly because still searching for my true indigenous roots. But I've found out some interesting information that maybe we'll relate later.
Yeah.
I worked at Palo Alto College here in San Antonio, a community college for about, let me see, 15 years. And I retired about 3 years ago in 2016. And since then, I've been working on a couple of musical projects. We put out another CD, and right now I'm writing a book, a family memoir and a biography on my brother, Frank Mariano Tejeda Jr., who was a state representative, state senator here in Texas, and US congressman when he died back in 1997, very young at 51 years old. So they have my whole life, brother.
Let's hear some music.
So this is Conjunto Aslan. You know, we started Conjunto Aslan in about 1975, 1976, while I was there at the University of Texas in Austin and working with the Brown Berets and other barrio and the Chicano.
Oh, let's play some music.
All right, this is our first CD. We didn't record the CD till 20 years later, after the mid 70s when we started. This is an original song by my compadre, Jose Flores, who's also the jefe of Shinashli, plays with the Conjunto Aslan. Original song. The first CD, Conjunto Aslan, was pura música del movimiento chicano. So we, of course, were danzantes, so we were influenced by the music de la danza. So this is an original song by Jose that's called Guerra en el Alma. DJing here.
Ya empezamos la revolución, la revolución.
Can you hear it?
Guerra. Ya empezamos la revolución, la revolución. En el alma ya empezamos la revolución.
Ya empezamos la revolución, carnal. Needed. So this was about the Chicano cultural renaissance, seeing the revolution in the arts, in our pensamiento, and in our spirituality.
Ya se mira la revolución, la revolución. En el arte ya se mira la revolución. En el alma ya empezamos la revolución. Oigan, ya se oye la revolución, la revolución. Oigan, ya se oye la revolución, la revolución. En canciones ya se oye la revolución. En el arte ya se mira la revolución. En el alma ya empezamos la revolución.
Coming to the end here.
Ya se siente la liberación, la liberación.
La liberación.
Ya se siente la liberación, la liberación. En el espíritu ya se siente la liberación.
El espíritu ya se siente la liberación.
Guerra.
All right. That's beautiful, brother. Now I want to ask you a question though, because we were talking about some of the struggles that you were involved in when you're giving your story. You're talking about some of the things that you were able to do later on and were to accomplish things you were fighting against, right? And it was a lot of it had to do with kind of us fighting for education. You joined the fight and leading the fight in many ways for educational justice and dignity and you know, but in order to fight those things have to exist. So obviously you experienced them as well. So can you talk about like your experience in education that was unjust, that was, whatever, well, perhaps, when you were just a little chiquinito, like how did you experience these big forces?
My parents, came from the Great Depression of the 30s, right? And my father from the deep South Side here in San Antonio didn't even finish the 4th grade. My mom was from Kennedy, Texas, then moved to San Antonio. And she was going to graduate. They graduated back then in the 30s in the 11th grade, but she left because of poverty, because of the racism that existed here at Harlandale High School, that there were more Germans and there was only like 9 Mexicanos there. And my mom says that her and her sister were going to Harlandale High School together and they had to walk all the way from Bergsmill over there. And she goes, well, they only had 2 dresses and they would like wear each other's dresses. One would wear them one day, the other would wear them the other day. So she left before she graduated, but she was lucky because a lot of Mexicanos didn't even go that far. Like I said, my father only didn't even finish the 4th grade. They wanted us to have a good Catholic education and they sent us here once they moved into the Harlandale area here in San Antonio to Catholic school at St. Leo's on the south side. And then it was 1st through 8th. And then after that, I went through Central Catholic High School for high school, 9th through 12th. But even with the nuns and the priests there, the Catholic priests, they were still racist, man. You'd think that religion would give them, this sense of justice, right? And they would still punish us for speaking Spanish. Then they had some lay teachers, when I was in the 3rd grade, I remember distinctly them talking about the Alamo. Here we're in the Alamo City, right, brother?
Right.
This is the flashpoint for the conflict of cultures between the Anglos and the Native Americans and the Mexicanos. And I remember this one 3rd grade teacher telling us and teaching us about the Alamo and saying how all the dirty Mexicans came over, and slaughtered the heroes of the Alamo. And here we were, primarily a bunch of little dirty Mexicans, right, in the classroom. But hearing those types of things from our teachers, I was like, well, shit, I didn't want to be a dirty Mexican, right? But those things stayed with me, even from a very young age. In high school, they didn't teach us nothing about, Mexican-American history, Chicano history. And it wasn't until I went to the University of Texas in Austin that took my first Chicano history course that I began, learning about our history, man, about Native American history, about Mexican history, about Chicano history, and then got involved in the Chicano movement. The other thing was, for instance, I said I played button accordion. I'm going to play a tune a little later on accordion. Even from a young age, I learned 9, 10 years old and played with Santiago Jimenez Jr. y su conjunto when I was 11, 12, 13. And then I left the conjunto, even though I was making some pretty good money and was able to help my parents. But I left because of the stigma attached to playing the button accordion, playing Mexican, Chicano music. And I felt ashamed. That's one of the worst things I think about this racist educational system within the United States is that, not only did they give us one of the worst educations because it's all based on property value, but even worse is the teachers and the textbooks and the racism that was involved there. They made us feel ashamed of who we were, of our culture. They made us feel ashamed of speaking Spanish. They made us feel ashamed. I take tacos to school and I like tacos, papas con huevo or chorizo con papas or frijoles or something. And I felt ashamed of taking that. I would go outside and hide, under the stairwell to eat my tacos, Well, most of the people in the cafeteria, a lot of them had white bread sandwiches, right? And bologna and ham and whatever. They made me ashamed of playing conjunto music so much that I left it. They made me feel ashamed of my father, who primarily spoke Spanish. So this was very psychological trauma, and that still exists within this educational system, that they made us feel ashamed and still do of who we are and our people and our culture and our history. They don't even teach us anything about our history except for stereotypes and negative ondas, right? Even to this day, for the most part. That's why Native American studies and Chicano studies were so important once they started coming in 50 years ago with the Chicano movement.
Yeah. So I mean, they turn every strength into a deficit, right? So you're stupid if you're bilingual, you're lazy if you work hard, and you have no taste even if your food is delicious. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
And they love our Mexican food, right? They love, our culture, as long as, we don't have to deal with the Mexicans, right?
Yeah.
They hate us. They love our food.
They love our food, but they want to talk shit about us for making it. I mean, it's just the most bizarre. Like if you think about, I recently interviewed Luis Ure, and he talked about back in the day, they used to call him and this is kind of a thing that's fallen out whatever. He told me that they used to call him a taco bender. That was like an insult, right? You're a taco bender.
Yeah.
That kind of fell out of, by the time I grew up, that was gone. But like
Beaner.
the beaner, that's obviously the option. Beaner, right?
It's interesting that a lot of the racism, even greaser, comes
Yeah.
from food, man. And I remember one time when I was young, the little white boy there at St. Leo's again was getting into like a hassle with a little Chicanito there, and he called him, well, you enchilada. And I was like, what the hell, man? What's up with this racism in our food? And then the irony is that they love Mexican food, right? That they're still racist as fuck, So I'm excuse me.
Yeah. Well, but everybody loves Mexican food. It's delicious.
Yeah.
It's one of like the big three, right? It's Mexican, Italian, Chinese. That's the food that everybody loves. So it's like,
this is the corn continent, brother.
Yeah,
absolutely.
Of course. But everybody loves Mexican food, and there's a reason everyone loves Mexican food. It's delicious, but it's just hilarious to me that like all these different things, like we're known to be hard workers or something like that, and that becomes negative. We have delicious food, that becomes negative. We make this
speaking Spanish is negative, right?
Two languages, that's negative.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible. Like,
Yep. That's the society and the country we live in, and it's still like that for the most part, but our educational system. That's why we've worked so hard to try to change it, and while it's happening little by little, it's too slow as far as I'm concerned. Right now in Texas, Chicanos and some other Latinos, mainly people of Mexican descent, are over half of the 5.4 million students here in the state. You combine that over half, we're like 53% or more, probably more now.
Yeah.
Combine it with the blacks and other, people of color, we're the great majority. And yet this whole state is controlled by white Republicans. And for the most part, the curriculum within the school is pretty much all white. So we need to change that. And that's what we've been working on also little by little.
So I want to transition into this question. So I know, I interviewed Christopher Carmona, I interviewed Tony Diaz, and your name keeps popping up, and it keeps popping up around this question of this textbook that was proposed just a few years ago. Can you tell us a little bit about that textbook and why it was so egregious?
Well, since my college days, I've been involved in Chicano studies and implementing Chicano studies within the schools. I told you about that festival we started in Austin and integrating Chicano arts and literature into our schools. So when I came back home, got involved with Guadalupe Cultural Arts Center, we started, let me just say that I think one thing before I go on into the mass struggle was that a lot of times Chicano cultural arts organizations don't really get the play that they deserve in history, you know what I mean? But Chicano cultural arts organizations and teatro and music and literatura and danza, they played a major role in the preservation and promotion and getting the arts, the Chicano arts within the schools, you know, when at times over the last 50 years that the schools weren't doing anything. So kudos to all the Chicana arts organizations out there and the important role that they played in our history since, you know, even before the Chicano movement, but definitely after the Chicano movement, 50 years now. When I went back and got my master's at the University of Texas San Antonio, started teaching there Chicano Mexican American studies, and then got hired to start a conjunto music program at Palo Alto College. And I also then sat on the first statewide committee to get Mexican American studies approved as a field of study in the state of Texas. And that was like in 2003 or so. So we got it approved. And after that, community colleges could begin offering an Associate of Arts degree in Mexican American Studies. And it was in line then with the Mexican American and Chicano Studies degrees at the major universities across the states, those that had it, right? Like UT Austin, University of Texas at El Paso, UT Rio Grande Valley, and so forth. So that was important, super important. And I started, we started then offering many of the colleges across Texas and here in San Antonio in the Alamo Colleges District. We have 5 colleges here in the Alamo Colleges District. Palo Alto College on the south side is one of them. We started offering the Mexican American Studies courses and the Associate of Arts degree. Well, it kind of like languished and people weren't really taking the courses, even though at Palo Alto we were like 70% Chicano. The problem was that you have to promote, you have to promote the courses, right, to our students, and they're part of the core curriculum. And so that's one of the reasons why we began the Center for Mexican American Studies. We realized we needed to have directors or coordinators at each campus for this field of study and this discipline. We had to promote it amongst our students, and we were going to keep the Associate of Arts and keep the courses and have them make. So we did that, and we started becoming more successful. I've been involved with the National Association for Chicano and Chicana Studies for many years, NOX and the Tejas Focal. I know that Chris talked about that. In about 2010, when all this stuff was happening and they were banning the Raza Studies course in Mexican American Studies in Arizona, right? And the Tucson Unified School District there. And we were having problems here with our Mexican American Studies program. We realized a bunch of us professors, MAS professors and across the city, that if we didn't do something, we were gonna lose the discipline. So we got together, we formed a loose collective that we called, ended up calling Somos MAS, Somos Mexican American Studies, San Antonio, Texas. And we started helping each other out and developing strategies to improve our MAS programs, to get the students, to build it up, develop centers for Mexican American Studies, a very coordinated effort. At that time, we realized also that one of the things that the Chicano movement had screwed up on, and I was part of the Chicano movement, and I'm still part of the Chicano movement, right? It's not dead yet, as some people like to think, that where we screwed up as a Chicano movement, we got Chicano studies and African American studies, Black studies, women's studies, environmental studies, mainly at colleges and universities. But what we didn't do is work towards implementing it from pre-K to the 12th grade, which was even more important, and we screwed up, So here we are, 40 years later with this realization that, we needed to get, ethnic studies into the schools from pre-K to 12. So with NOX Tejas Focal, I got involved in the MAS committee for pre-K to 12, and I was the chair for various years. That's where I first met Chris Carmona, in fact, met Tony Diaz, and a lot of other people across the state through NOX Tejas and through this committee. And we then, in 2013, 2014, we went before the Texas State Board of Education and asked for a class, one class in Mexican American studies, right? Mexican American history. They turned us down and they said the compromise was, well, let's develop textbooks for all of the ethnic studies, and that'll make it easier to then implement a class. Well, we thought, okay, well, this is a win. Let's do that, right? It's something. So let's start developing textbooks for these classes that then we can implement. Well, the next round of textbook approval, there was only one textbook that was submitted. And part of that was our fault too, because we didn't submit our own textbooks. And really there just wasn't enough time at that. It happened like from one year to the next.
Yeah.
Only one person submitted a textbook, and it was a gabacha who was on the Texas State Board of Education before, this Mexican American heritage. And it was racist as hell and stereotypical, basically called us communists, you know, in there, and had a big section on Latin America. What, you know, even though we're related, you know, as indigenous people, but totally was putting us down, you know. So then there was a big fight, and we protested it. We formed a committee to examine the book closely. As Christopher Carmona said, we found about 400 errors in that textbook. We had major protests across the state and at the Texas State Board of Education. Long story short, we got that book tossed out completely. Then we went back and said, look, man, we're doing this the wrong way again. We had asked for a course. We're asking for a course again. This textbook thing isn't working. Well, they did another round of textbooks and that didn't work again. So then we went back and started protesting and lobbying again and worked towards getting the first Mexican American history course approved. What happened was when they approved it, then the Texas State Board of Education, which is controlled by 10 Republican Anglo candidates and 5 Democrats, people of color, when they approved it, they changed the name of the course from Mexican American Studies to it was something like Ethnic Studies, an overview of the history of the American people of Mexican descent. And we were like, what the fuck? Yeah, no, that's what they did. They didn't want to call it not even Mexican American Studies, much less would they have gone for calling it Chicano Studies. You know what I mean? And Mexican American Studies was already a field of study since 2003 in the state of Texas, you know, approved by the Texas Higher Education Coordinating Board. This was in 2014, right? And it was called Mexican American Studies. And then they couldn't even accept that. They just wanted to fuck with us, man. You know, they just really wanted to tell us, we control, we can even change your name. So we protested that. You know, we had a coordinated statewide protest, man, press conference in 6 cities across Texas. We protested at the State Board of Education. And then we finally got them to change the name back. And there was a sort of a compromise to Ethnic Studies, Mexican American Studies, and finally got that course approved, the first in the history of Texas in 2018. Since then, this past year, just last month, just this past couple of weeks ago, they approved the first African American Studies course in Texas. And right now, we're working on developing the first Native American history, Native American Studies course for Texas also. So these are all important and historic victories, you know, but it's come with a lot of chingazos and a lot of politica and a lot of protests. And I guess that's the way it's always been for our people. You know, if we're gonna get anything, any type of justicia and equality here, we have to fight for it. And we continue to do that.
Yeah, so that's really fantastic that you defeated the questionable Americans of dubious and treacherous ties to Mexico textbook or whatever the fuck they were calling it. Hey, so we have a question. We have a question from the audience. Comes from Kelly Flores. She asks, "What do you think about the mandate of ethnic studies statewide, K through 12?" And so I don't know if you've been following what's going on in California. I know Kelly is very involved in the struggle in California to get that, to push that through.
ethnic studies in general right there, which is
Right.
basically what we've been fighting for too, but definitely for Chicano
What,
studies.
have you been
And
following? Have you been following what's going on in California with the ethnic studies bill that got
I
passed?
did, I followed it all along, and I've written letters and of support and signed petitions throughout the years. I don't know, did they ever finally pass this ethnic studies bill that makes it mandatory?
All right, so I'm not the best person to ask, not because I'm not involved, but because sometimes details elude me because I'm a poet, right? So it's my excuse. But no. What happened was they did pass it. The first one, the Alejo bill, did not, and then after that, the second one did. I'm blanking on the guy's name, but the second one pushed it through, and they got it through. But then they challenged the model curriculum was developed, but then they challenged, then these kind of right wing elements kind of challenged it, as always happens, and then
Mhm.
it just got. Now they're trying to pass it again through, but now they're trying to dilute it as with their. I mean, it's the California way though, not the Texas way. So it's not like there's a book where they saying mañana culture or something like that. So they're trying to water it down. That's the best way to put it. But what it was going to be was it was going to be a graduation requirement, or it's going to
Yeah,
be, and it's they jam it up. They jam it up. So it's being jammed
yeah,
up right now. But
yeah.
it was going to be a graduation requirement for high school. Like you had to take this ethnic studies course in order to graduate high school. So yeah. So then the
I
process
think
of
I think that's important, and really, I think all of the states across the nation need to move towards implementing ethnic studies in general, and specifically Mexican American studies, African American studies, Native American studies, Asian American studies. To really learn the true history of the United States, not this whole whitewashed, watered down history that they've taught us from the beginning of this country. And to feel, I say, we are part of this country, right? And to know the true history of these United States of America. Native American history is so important. And of course, Chicano studies and Mexican American studies, we as Chicanos and Mexicanos, we are Native Americans first. So that's very much a part. It starts out with our Native American history, then moves through the colonial period, the Spanish colonial period, through Mexican independence, through then, here the Alamo in Texas, and the civil rights movement, and bring it to contemporary times, the importance of our arts and literature in that regard also. But really need to teach all the ethnic studies, and they should be not just in high school requirement, but from pre-K to 12 also is very important,
yeah.
because we lose a lot of our poor students, and students of color before they go into high school and before they graduate. And I think this would go a long way to helping them succeed. And studies have showed that these ethnic studies courses and Mexican studies courses helps them to succeed in school, and naturally so. If you have teachers that are going to just be telling you, you're wrong, this racist teaching, stereotypical teaching, drug dealers that we see in mass media,
Yeah.
just it really doesn't tell who we are as a people, the true uh, history of our people here. So we need that to help all
Yeah.
of our students succeed. And not just Chicano students, but all students, across the board.
Well, I think this question of ethnic studies. I mean, it's called ethnic studies, but what we're really talking about is like the truth. We're talking about like just a wider lens to look at the truth and what actually happened.
That's right.
That's what I think. But I also think that sometimes we don't emphasize enough that what we're talking about is educational justice. That what we're talking about is educational dignity. And I don't think
That's
we
right.
emphasize that enough because it's get lost in terms of like ethnic studies, of this, of that, and all these like interdisciplinary stuff that like that make for good careers for academics to write about, but don't
Mhm.
necessarily make for like winning strategies. I think, and I say this not as like saying everyone's fucking up, or I say this as a suggestion that like I think that we should emphasize more. Those of us who are involved in this, that this is a fight for educational justice. This is a fight for
Right.
educational dignity, and
That's right.
that's what we need to be emphasizing. That's like the point we need to be hammering home, that we're talking about dignity. We're talking about justice. We're talking about you're trying to raise our kids to hate themselves, and then
Yeah.
and then when we don't let you do that, or when we fight for you not to do that, you say we're hateful. You say
Yeah.
we're resentful. You say that. No, 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 no. So we got to like really drive this point home, because I experienced that in school. Like I was taught to hate myself. I was taught to, I mean, I just had on oh God, was Tim Z Hernandez.
Yeah,
And
I heard
Tim
parts of that.
and Tim was talking about this, doing research on this book he called Mañana is Heaven, or
I read that.
Mañana. So he's talking about Jack Kerouac, and he's talking about On the Road.
Yeah.
And you know, Jack Kerouac has an episode where he's on the road, and he has a kind of a an affair, fling, with this with a you know, migrant woman who's a worker, right? And he has this, like, just such an exoticized idea about her, but not just her, also her brother. He's like very, like, you know, oh, these are simple people, and I wish I could be simple like them, and I can't, because I must go off and live my complicated white life, and just I need these simple Mexicans. That's a horrible thing for that to appear in that book. That's terrible.
Yep.
But I'll tell you what's even worse. What's even worse is that, like, I remember being in high school and reading Catcher in the Rye. I remember reading The Metamorphosis, which is a pretty cool book. I remember reading before that, Where the Red Fern Grows, when I was a kid. I remember reading all. So the only time I remember really at high school really, like, getting any Mexicans ever appeared, I all I really remember was On the Road, and it appears as these two simple people that are a passing episode in Jack Kerouac's life. So I mean, that's a devastating effect to tell me I don't exist, and the moment I do exist, I'm like, I'm a simpleton, and I'm like, you know, like, you know, like that's ridiculous. So I think that
And that still exists today, Max,
that's
within
undignified.
the curriculum.
That's
For the
undignified.
most part, they're negative stereotypes, if we exist at all, within the textbooks. Complete omission in a lot of ways, and glossed over for a lot of the people of color, and that has to change. You're right, and it's more about educational justice than even educational equality, but that's tied into it too, right? And as long as it's based on property value, and most of our people are poor people out here, we're not going to have justice in our educational system.
Yeah.
So we're starting at a tremendous disadvantage here.
Yeah. So in addition to fighting for, in addition to your work at the Guadalupe Center, in addition to this, you're also a publisher. You're also involved. You also, publish your own music. You also, present your own music. You're a culture creator, but you're also, someone that's involved in kind of pushing not just your own art, but not pushing, but, like, promoting not just your own art, but the art of others. So I've been talking to a lot of publishers and people that are, kind of, who create platforms about this question that we need to fight. Flower songs, hell yeah. Um, so I've been talking to a lot of people about this idea, though. We kind of face, in terms of the arts and just expression and stuff, we face these kind of two impressions, these twin impressions, one of a misrepresentation and one of underrepresentation. And sometimes as we fight underrepresentation, we allow ourselves to be tools of misrepresentation, because that's the attitude, something's better than nothing. So how do we fight that? How do we fight both at the same time? How do we fight back in a dignified way?
And that's a great question, but I think you're absolutely right. We have to fight both of those things. Underrepresentation at all levels of society here within the United States of America, but definitely in the educational system, in the textbooks, in the courses, our misrepresentation, a lot of the negative stereotypes, and complete, in a lot of ways, underrepresentation. We almost don't exist at all. But you saw how within the new movement here, with that book that came out, American Dirt, what was it called? And the whole movement that developed with Dignidad Literaria, very important, also showing how the major publishing industry here in the United States and the big five, again, totally underrepresented as Native Americans, as raza, as Chicanos, as Latinos, Latinxes, Chicanxes, within the publishing industry. And that's important, because these are the things that people read, right?
Yeah.
Completely dominated by the whites, both in terms of staff and the books that they put out, and we need to change that. So we have to do that, as you say, in a dignified manner. So we need to continue pushing for correct representation, and representation at the same time within the educational system here at large, from pre-K through university years, within the publishing industry, within government, within business and board meetings at all level. And we have talented people, we have talented doctors, we have talented lawyers, we have talented politicians, we have talented educators, we have talented writers, and we need to just put them up. I agree with you. One of the reasons that we started Aslan Libre Press, here's our original first logo, was because, who was publishing our work, right? We started publishing in about 2009. And even at this late date, during the Chicano movement, there were probably more sort of independent Chicano presses than they probably are now, but those all have gone by the wayside. And the majors only publish very little. So we have to do it ourselves, man, and there's a lot of talented people. And man, right now, Aslan Libre Press, we've published 12 books. We're getting ready to publish our 13th book. And we kind of take it slow because it's just been my wife, Anissa Nofre, and I that do all the work. And we were working full time, right? So it's a different type of model. But early on, when we were accepting manuscripts, damn, so many people were sending us manuscripts. So I know why Edward with Flower Song books right now is like, let's just publish everybody. There's a lot of good writers out there that are not being published. And if they come past your desk, let's do it. And I applaud him too. And I really enjoyed your book with the Mowing Leaves of Grass. And I think it's a very important piece of work there, Matt, and revolucionario, brother. And really, pointing out the injustices here in our society that have existed for our people from the beginning of this country. So I applaud you that. And I applaud Flower Song Press for publishing all of those. And here we're putting our little grano de arena. We started out with Alurista's book, Alurista's 10th book of poetry. And we've published 12 books. I have some of them here, right? Our second book was this Aztec calendar coloring book.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's kind of a glare there, but.
Now you can see it. There we go. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, we did a 40-year retrospective of Reyes Cárdenas' work, right? Chicano poet. And we published our only academic book, at least by more scholarly, was Juan Gomez Quiñones out of UCLA, Indigenous Quotient, Stalking Words. That's Malaquias Montoya on the cover. We always have, artistic covers. Las Nalgas de J-Lo, Barbara Renault Gonzalez, and we published the award-winning a former San Antonio and Texas poet laureate, Larianne Guerrero's book about her grandfather who passed away, Crown for Gubensino, that won Best Book of Poetry from the Texas Institute of Letters.
Yeah.
And our latest one is the Canción Cannibal Cabaret by Amalia Leticia Ortiz, radical, revolutionary, feminist, Chicanx book. It's really a Chicana punk rock opera.
Amalia is a legend.
Amalia's great. And we published, from California also, Barbara Jane Reyes, and Juan Gomez and Alista from California. So we're doing our work. You can find our books. Just go to our website, aslanlibrepress.com. It's back there on the poster. Check out our catalog and hopefully support independent presses. Buy a book or two and gift some. Books are important. And support Flower Song books too. So yeah, we had to stop taking manuscripts because there was just so damn many. We published a lot of other people, Vincent Cooper and Nawaleando en Dos, with everything written here on this one is three languages, Nahuatl, Espanol, and English. Vincent, a young poet here from San Anto, where the reckless ones come to die. So our next book is, and we're working on it right now, selecting the material, Anissa and I, for Roberto Dr. Cindy Rodriguez, You know him, right?
Oh man, I know all these people. This is
Yeah.
beautiful.
Yeah, he's been, I think, for almost 50 years, one of our most important voices as a columnist, award-winning columnist, but then, got his master's and his doctorate, and now as an educator, and one of the ones that has really pushed, documented and chronicled the Chicano movement, but our movement also to find our indigenous roots, right? And the importance, like, of his book, Our Sacred Maize is Our Mother. So we're publishing a almost 50-year retrospective of his work, starting from La Gente magazine when he was a student at college, when he wrote for Lowrider magazine, through his column, periods in the 80s and 90s, through his excerpts from his academic works and his books. So we're excited about that. And hopefully by the end of 2020 or early 2021, we should have that book out. We hope to use it as a text also for high school and university students.
Yeah. So speaking about, you've been talking about this, you've shown so many of the different books, you've shown so much support, but you earlier was talking about, we have to represent, right? We have to do that. So let's hear it, man. Represent, man. Let's hear it. Bust out that accordion.
Yeah, brother. This was the first CD of the Conjunto Aslan. Where is it?
There.
When I was young, but really we recorded it.
Which one is you? Is that you with the mustache?
Yeah, right in the middle there.
That's
with
great.
The bandana. Yeah. We recorded this CD in 1998. And like I said, pura música del movimiento chicano. So I'm going to play an excerpt of this, and then I'd like to play a little bit later a couple of the more recent ones that we have. Where the hell is it?
Brother, I think we're going to have a part 2.
Yeah. How much time are we in? I know you've been doing
time to do the song and share some final thoughts. I got Liliana Ramirez Viruer coming right up. So I'm very open to doing a part 2 though, if you want.
Well, that'd be good. I'm gonna play something, since I played that one, play something from my new CD that I did with my cousin Armando Tejeda. I don't know if you can see that. Raíz Chicanx. And this is actually not an original song, but it's our interpretation or arrangement of a cumbia colombiana, right? The acordeon with cumbia colombiana. And this is an arrangement of a piece called El Canoero. And I'm just gonna play part of it because it's a little bit long, Matt. And then I'll bring it down. So here we go. El Canoero, little cumbia colombiana original arrangement.
Yo soy el canoero que rema y rema, que rema y rema. Yo soy el canoero que rema y rema, que rema y rema. Buscando la vasilla que es mi morena. La busco para darle cositas buenas. Yo salgo del río Sinú y sigo por el Santoyo, tirado de playa en playa, todas las huellas que dejas tú. Me deslizo por el Sausa y por Santa Magdalena, llego boca de ceniza y no encuentro a mi morena. Llego a boca de ceniza y no encuentro a mi morena. Playera, playera, mi playerita, ¿a dónde tú vas? Mi playerita, ¿dónde tú te vas? Mi playerita, ¿a dónde te vas? Mi playerita. Este pobre canoero se va a matar, este pobre canoero se va a matar, este pobre canoero se va a matar, este pobre canoero se va a matar.
Épale, cumbia, mamá. That's it, brother.
That's beautiful, brother. All right. So so we're coming up on the hour. We're gonna do a part 2 for sure. Is there anything you want to you want to end this with?
Well, you know, just un saludos a todos los camaradas out there that are listening to this, and again, congratulations on these virtual online offerings that you're doing here with artistas, poetas, académicos. I think it's very important, especially during these times of el cabrona virus. And just un saludos a todos los camaradas that are out there, my brothers and sisters, Chicanexes, and all the other Latinos and Native American brothers and sisters that keep in the fight, keep in the struggle. Know that we have our brothers and sisters here in Yanaguana, San Antonio, Texas, that are allies, are in solidarity. And like you say, you know, we continue to fight for our land, for justicia, you know, and for that dignity, Max, Met. So keep the faith, stay strong, and we're gonna come out on the other side of this cabron. I like to call it el cabrona virus, you know, because I mean, it had to happen under the pinche president, you know. But these are tough times for our people in a lot of ways, you know, for our Native American brothers with this pandemic, and people, our Chicanx brothers and sisters here, but across the globe. So we're here doing our bit, and hopefully we'll see on the other side and reach a true justicia and liberación for all of our people and all people, brother.
And we'll definitely have a part 2 to expand on this, play some more music, and talk a little bit more about the Guadalupe Center. So I'm really honored that you shared this hour with us, and much more to talk about. And I will be speaking to you soon, sir.
Thank you, Matt, and keep up the great work. And I'm looking forward to your next book too.
All right.
Who knows? Maybe Aslan Libre Press will publish it.
Who knows? The future is unwritten. So nos
Hey.
vemos, man. I'll see you soon.
Hey. Oh.